station on C-SPAN radio and at cspan.org.
Now, Republican presidential candidate Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky at a campaign rally in Iowa City. With him is his father, Ron Paul, a former U.S. representative from Texas and former presidential candidate. Iowa holds its first in the nation caucuses on Monday.
Welcome, everybody. Is there anybody in the house ready to make America free again? We think that's a little better slogan. So, I need to talk to you about the caucuses tomorrow night, and then I'm going to make a couple of introductions. There's 5 things you need to know before 6:30 tomorrow night rolls around. First of all, this is a great question for this crowd. How many have voted in an Iowa caucus before? Raise your hand. Look at that. How many will be voting in your first caucus tomorrow? Raise your hand. Yeah. So, for those of you that voted before, here's what you need to know. We've had redistricting since the last time we had caucuses. That means that your caucus, your precinct, has likely changed, and therefore your caucus may well be in a different location. Second, a lot of voters, especially those going to their first caucus, believe that their precinct, the place they vote for school board or city council or whatever, is the same place they go for their caucus. It's not. Your caucus will be in a different location, almost certainly, than where you vote normally. So, to make sure you go to the right location and you don't miss your opportunity because you have to be checked in by 7, this is the website where you can put in your email, put in your postal address, and find your caucus location. www.yourcaucus.com. It's that easy. www.yourcaucus.com. That easy, all right? So put that in. Make sure you know where you're going tomorrow night. Do we have any high school seniors in the room? Any high school seniors? Wow, look at that. Yeah, love that. If you are a high school senior, then you can vote in your caucus as long as you're 18 before the general election this year, which is November of this year, the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. So plan on attending your caucus tomorrow night and participate. And if your friends are voting for Rand Paul, take them with you. Now, you may not be registered as a Republican. At this point, you may not be registered at all. That's okay. You can register tomorrow night at your caucus. You don't have to be registered at this point. But if you are going to register at your caucus, make sure that you show up by 6:30 so that you have time to get that done before the balloting begins shortly after 7. All right? Final thing I need to point out. We have most of our precincts in Johnson County and the surrounding counties filled, but we don't have all of them filled with speakers. What we want is to have one person in every precinct in the state who is willing to speak on behalf of Rand Paul. Now, Cliff is going to talk to you later for the students, so this is for the non-students in the room. If you are an adult living outside the student precincts, then on your way out, please check in at our Rand Paul table and let them know that you would be willing to speak for 2 to 3 minutes on behalf of Rand Paul. If you don't feel comfortable speaking, that's okay. We have a written statement that you can read, all right? So now I get to introduce to you First of all, we're going to recognize one of our great supporters in the state of Iowa, and I want to recognize Pat Miletich. Now, Pat is part of the Ultimate Fighting Championships. If you're a UFC fan, he's in the Hall of Fame, and he broadcasts for Mark Cuban's network. So thanks, Pat, for joining us tonight. Our first guest this evening is, I've really gotten to know him this year, and you know what? When his time as a congressman ends, I'm recommending he hits the comedy circuit, because Congressman Massey is a great storyteller, he's a great patriot, and he's a great defender of liberty. He's one of the great defenders of liberty in the United States Congress, and so let's give a big welcome to Congressman Thomas Massey.
You guys are live. I want to start out by talking about labels. Do people try to label you all? They try to label me in Congress. They can't figure me out. Here's a Republican that drives an electric car. What's up with that? So some people, some people just call me a Tea Party extremist, right? That one doesn't fit too well. Some people call me a constitutional conservative. Sometimes they'll call me libertarian. You know the label I like the best? It's when they say, he's one of the guys that came up with the plan to take out John Boehner. All right. What I'm going to tell you now, you might not want to hear. There's a lot of different interpretations of the conservative ideology, okay? So when you get to Congress, you need to hire good staff. But you need a diverse staff, one that represents the ideological spectrum of conservatism, right? So when I hired my staff, I got the most diverse staff I could come up with. So we would have great arguments. I hired half Ron Paul people and half Rand Paul people. You should see them argue. So why did I spend 15 hours in a car coming from Kentucky up to Iowa this week? Because it's the same reason I ran for Congress. If I have to look at my grandkids, and we're living in a socialist country or a fascist country, or our empire has imploded, and I have to look them in the eye and tell them I didn't do everything I could do to save this country, I would feel so bad. That's why I ran for Congress. That's why I came to Iowa. And you might be saying, well, didn't you look at the polls, Congressman Massey? You should have just stayed in Kentucky. The polls say, we're not going to win. Folks, I didn't look at the polls, because the polls said I wasn't going to win. The polls said Rand was never going to be a senator. 3 months ago, the polls said the Democrat was going to win the governor's race in Kentucky. And now we've got a Tea Party conservative governor in Kentucky. Has anybody here, show of hands, just admit it, ever watched House of Cards? Has anybody ever binge-watched House of Cards? Same number of hands. All right, this is a show. It's a fictional show, folks, okay? I've been trying to explain that to these presidential candidates. They think it's an instructional video. Really, though, if you want to get on Netflix and find out how Congress works, don't watch House of Cards. You need to watch The Walking Dead. These are, and I submit to you, all of these candidates, except for Senator Paul, are zombies, folks. All right? How do I know Senator Paul's not a zombie? How do we know he didn't get bitten? How do we know this? Look at his record. He is the only one with a 100% liberty score in Congress. He is the only one. There were 99 senators against him when I stood with him on the floor of the Senate when he filibustered something called the Freedom Act. Yeah. Why did he filibuster it? Because we were trying to undo the evil of the Patriot Act, and they hijacked our bill called the Freedom Act and made it just as evil. And he was the only one that would stand up and say, this is a sham. This is a sham. And Washington, D.C. has been a sham. The only way you're going to fix it is to elect Senator Paul. Now, who's ready for some liberty? Woo!
Rand, because he stands with us.
What if I told you your vote makes a difference?
What if I said it's possible to force the nation to listen?
What if we made it our mission to flood the polls on February 1st?
Show the world what the youth vote is worth. What if this election season marks the rebirth of student activism?
What if the millennial moment has arisen?
What if I told you the future of our country rests on your decision to elect the only candidate with a liberty-centered vision?
The only candidate that stands tirelessly for you.
He came with an open heart, ready to listen.
The only candidate who isn't blindly leading us to world war.
I have a lot of family members that are locked up, and no other politician is standing up and fighting for those individuals.
I stand with Rand because Rand stands with us.
Rand Paul needs you.
10,000 high school students, college students,
Iowa youth, the grassroots.
Caucus for Truth.
And prove once and for all that the youth vote does matter.
The Iowa 10,000 is about spreading a message
That freedom is not dead.
But actually more widespread than ever.
this caucus could be won by the committed few.
Which literally means that each and every vote counts.
We need this man as our next commander-in-chief. He's been given a mandate
to fan the flame of liberty.
I stand with Rand because Rand stands with us. He was a different kind of Republican.
He's not a corrupt politician like Hillary Clinton.
He's not part of the Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio establishment.
The only true political independent.
He's the only true defendant of the entire Bill of Rights, not just the Second Amendment.
Going to Ferguson, going to Detroit, going to the south side of Chicago, and bringing this message to people who hadn't heard it.
I stand with Rand because he stands with us.
Under Rand Paul, individual liberty is reignited.
A country reunited. A union undivided.
I stand with Rand because he stands with us.
He's the only candidate that understands that we are not truly free
When we sacrifice our God-given liberty for security.
when a Federal Reserve Bank determines the value of our currency.
When the cost of college tuition is bloated by government overreach into the education
That
system.
we can never be free with a court system and outdated drug laws that disproportionately punish minorities and African American communities.
When our military strength is spread out overseas.
That we will never truly be free unless we embrace the rights and liberties of everyone.
Now more than ever, Rand Paul needs you, the fanboys of the Constitution, the Iowa youth.
To seize the heart of the campaign and put it in the hands of the grassroots. You have the power to break up the establishment,
Build up the movement.
inspire the ambivalent, give voice to the silent,
Force the ideas of liberty to the forefront of the
and
debate.
fundamentally change the course of this election.
Be the most vocal and effective fighters for freedom and peace. And let's elect Rand Paul as our next commander-in-chief.
Ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming Congressman Ron Paul.
It sounds like the revolution is alive and well. And we're not going to allow the American people to forget it because it is so crucial. And of course, this week is a crucial week for us. But before I get started in my few comments, before we introduce the next president, I want to, we have a lot of family members here, and I can't introduce them all. I might miss one or something. But I can't miss one special person, and that is my wife. She is with me, Carol, somewhere here. Now, it's been a few years since I've been here for giving speeches. I think 4 years ago I hung around a little bit. And I think 8 years ago I was, but you know, 8 years ago, my wife and I celebrated our wedding anniversary here. We were married 51 years, and tomorrow we'll celebrate 59 years. I usually think about liberty in a broad spectrum. Where has liberty been, and how long have we been fighting for it, and how long have we been involved? Is this an American invention or what? No, the struggle's been around for a long, long time. And I think back, what are the basic principles of this free libertarian society? And it's basically, you know, the absence of the use of violence against your neighbor. And, you know, it's sort of like thou shalt not lie, steal, cheat, and kill. And, you know, it works rather well. Actually, those rules were written even before Moses put out the Ten Commandments. It's been around for a long time. And it was a code to tell the people what kind of ethical standards you should have to advance society. And they have been very valuable, and we've talked about them for, you know, a long time. But something has happened these past 100 years. Things have gotten turned upside down. We still have that ethical code. Individuals abuse those codes quite frequently, you know, and still people do bad things.
We're having a little trouble with your mic. Do you mind?
Okay, now maybe you can hear me. Testing. Okay, should I start all over again? No! And that individual with me tonight is my wife, Carol. And the revolution is alive and well. Now, I do want to check. I want to check and make sure that some of you remember a year or two ago when I was here. Does anybody remember that we used to talk about ending the Fed? Okay, how about it's time to bring our troops home? And it's time to not load up our prison with non-violent criminals associated with our drug war. Let's eliminate the war on drugs by the federal government. And as I was saying a minute ago, I was going to get a little bit into the history of liberty, and making the point that personal conduct is very important. Even if you live in a perfectly free society, the conduct of the citizens make all the difference in the world. And so the code of conduct actually started even before, probably 1,500 years or 300 or 400 years before Moses gave us brought down the Ten Commandments. And no lying, no cheating, no stealing, and no killing. Good code. And most people follow it. It's still people recognize it. There's a lot of abuse, but people still recognize you're not supposed to steal, and you're not supposed to lie, and you're not supposed to murder and kill people. But what has happened is now it's turned on its head. My biggest goal is to make sure the government doesn't do any of those things. We have a government that will lie us into war. They steal through the income tax. They steal through fraudulent debasement of the currency through the Federal Reserve. So they are the real culprits, and there's a lot of unnecessary, illegal, unconstitutional wars going on and too much killing that's coming back to haunt us, and we have to take that under control because it will not bring us peace and prosperity if we continue with the foreign policy that we have today. Thomas Hogshead said a long time ago, the ideas of liberty must grow weak in the hearts of man if the tyrants ever want to kill, or before the tyrants can kill those ideas. So once the ideas of liberty become weak in our hearts, that's the only time tyrants can be successful. And the good news is that the American people, in spite of the media, in spite of what you read, in spite of the propaganda, in spite of the polls, the love of liberty is growing by leaps and bounds, which is going to put the tyrants on defense. And that's exactly what is happening today in the campaign, because they don't want to hear the message of liberty. They will have people all over the spectrum, because they will all argue for the use of more government and more conservative authoritarianism, as well as this ancient idea of government control of the economy. You know, one thing that was interesting in our early history was at the Plymouth Colony. The Plymouth Colony was very unsuccessful, so to speak. More than half died, and they had collectivism. Everybody was to work together and share what they raised, and they starved. And after 2 years, the Governor Bradford said, "It's not working." What he is saying is socialism wasn't working. So he made this really wild suggestion, an idea that had been around even before Plymouth Colony. He said, "Why don't we turn the property over to each and every one of you as an individual?" And guess what happened? Productivity skyrocketed. There was no more starvation. And the interesting part is that there were excesses in production, enough to take care of all the people who were too sick to have a garden. So it does work. It does work if we just give it a chance, this whole idea. And to think now that we have people on the wide end of the spectrum that want to say that we need more government, more authoritarianism, whether it's conservative authoritarianism or liberal conservatism, I'll tell you what, this country should not even pay any attention to the concept of going backwards to the ideas of socialism. You know, after we had the Ten Commandments and all, another major move on the ideas of freedom was the Great Charter, the Magna Carta. And the Magna Carta made an attempt to do what I was talking about a minute ago, to hold the government to the same conditions that they hold the people to, and the idea of the writ of habeas corpus. What's happening today, the writ of habeas corpus, because there are some who are running even today as conservatives who are willing to give up the writ of habeas corpus and sacrifice that liberty that's been around for a long, long time. I would say, be careful. Look for the civil libertarian that understands that. And I've heard the candidate we're supporting here tonight make very clear statements about the whole idea that our government now can hold people without charges. And not only that, some of them can end up in Guantanamo and who knows where. But the principle of liberty needs to be revived. And I'm saying it is being. We have every reason to be optimistic, because we can't just listen to the polls. We can't listen to one election. Because I'll tell you what's on our side. What's on our side is that we don't have to have nuclear weapons to win this. Ideas have consequences, and good ideas have good consequences, and we're on the side of good ideas. So the whole job we have is getting that message out and understanding that liberty is a moral issue, it's an individual issue, and it's built around a principle of non-aggression, which I think is wonderful and beautiful, because what it does, it says we can't aggress against anybody else. Does that say that we should impose ourselves on other people? No. You know, there's a lot of talk about in this campaign about humility. I happen to sort of like the subject and think that it pays off to be a bit humble at times. And libertarianism actually encourages you to be humble, because the first thing you do is you recognize what you don't know. And that, you know, you get along a lot better if you say, you know, I just don't know that answer. And in politics, how do any of us know what's good for your next door neighbors? We don't know what's best. How they should spend their money and when they should go off and fight wars. We don't know what's best for them, so we should admit we don't know. But then the other thing that humility invites is that we're willing not to do the things we know we shouldn't do. And if you get confused, I have a simple solution. If you're not sure about what we should or should not do, for political reasons, we could start with the Constitution. That would be a good place to start. Follow the Constitution. The other thing is there's been a lot of talk about corruption, and I don't know if you've been reading the news. There's a little bit of that in Washington, a little bit of corruption there. But most people think, yeah, get rid of the corruption. That's when the politicians take money under the table. Yeah, there's a few, but that's not the major corruption. There's some of that, and it's right to be annoyed with that. But where the real corruption is in the ideas, the ideology, the policies that we have, the stealing that goes on, robbing people who work hard, making sure that interest rates can't be paid to anybody. If you're retired and want to take care of yourself, you have 0 or 1% interest rates while somebody else gets free money and gets bailed out. That is corruption, although it's considered legal. But the corruption of ideas, this collectivism, this whole idea that you don't have a right to your life, you don't have a right to your liberty, and you don't have a right to the fruits of your labor, I happen to believe that we should have all those rights. Now let me close, because you have a special speaker coming up here. Freedom, remember, is popular. Freedom is popular for one very good reason. It brings people together. Are we divisive in this country? Couldn't be more divisive, yelling and screaming and hollering and demanding and saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I have the solution. But it's not freedom that they're offering. Why does freedom bring people together? Like it brought the people together at the Plymouth Colony. They came together, they worked hard, families worked, they had more production, they helped the people who couldn't take care of themselves, and it stamped very clearly that it didn't work. What was the 20th century all about? The 20th century, I think we should look back, and hopefully we can look back and say, the one thing we did, we buried the ideology of communism, and we didn't have to drop one nuclear bomb on them. But if you understand liberty, it should bring everybody together. Why? Because you're not going to tell other people what to do. It opens up the door for whatever religious belief you want, whatever beliefs you have on sexual behavior, whatever beliefs you have on what books you're going to read. You don't have to have the government involved in these decisions. So you bring people together. That means leftists and people on the right, if they can come to a libertarianism because they use their liberties as they see fit. And if we're not going to be, not so much that we can't be judgmental and make an opinion and teach our children a certain way if people use liberty in a bad manner, but if they use it and you think it's immoral, you have to be tolerant of some of the things that people do, because if not, it doesn't work. Then if you use the iron fist of government to say you are going to live your life this way, you're going to spend your money this way, and one side says you should have these kind of habits, the other side said this is the way we want you to spend your money. I think a simple explanation of this is what would it be like You know, if you had a next door neighbor that you thought they weren't raising their kids right, and you marched in and you gave them instruction on exactly what to do, you know, it wouldn't go over very big. But this is what we do around the world. We go around and we tell people, but I think, you know, dishonestly, we go around and tell them how we're going to make them great Democrats and making them a great democratic society. We set it up, we force elections, they get an election, and we don't like the dictator, so we bomb them the next day. So this is the insanity of that foreign policy. It's where we are going on civil liberties, because they don't understand that every individual should be protected, and we should be friends with everybody who honors and respects the idea that I am never going to interfere with your life and your property, and there's always going to be a square deal. We're going to do what we promise. Can you imagine what a wonderful world that would be if everybody accepted those principles? And yet, I don't entrust it to the government. The government is now the biggest abusers of those rights. So our goal is to further spread the message of liberty and work toward this freer society. And I'll tell you what you can do. You have not just theoretical stuff. I like the theoretical things, and I like the history of liberty. But then there are some practical things. Every once in a while, a few of us get involved in politics, you know, and we try to get things done. But you have an opportunity tomorrow and to spread this message by sending a message. It can make all the difference in the world. So, yes, it's very frustrating, and a lot of people are very frustrated about doing it. One thing I learned early on from a teacher of mine, Leonard Reed, he said that, remember, it's not a majority issue. We're not Democrats in that sense, that it's not the majority that you need. You need an irate minority keen on spreading the brush fires of liberty into all the people, because if you spread this message, the minority, which is 8% of the population, believe me, if you're in this audience tonight, you're already in that 8%, so you don't have to get disgusted. But for us to be and discouraged, but for us to continue this success, we have to send a message. We also have to take your leadership and get people into office. I always thought my role was mainly to go to Washington on a promise and do what I said and get reelected, figuring that maybe someday somebody would look at it, but look at the record. But this is important. So, yes, the political process is filled with frustrations and irritations and corruption and all these things. But the prevailing attitude of a people always exists in the government. The prevailing attitude of the people today is in flux. The era that was of the 20th century, not only communism, and then it was taken over by Keynesian interventionism and central bank inflationism, it's coming to an end, and that's wonderful, because our message... There is no other message that will bring the people together other than the message of liberty. And that is the only answer that we have today to offer. The vacuum is out there already. It's collapsing. Even today, we're wondering, when will our government tell us that we can't even take cash out of the bank? The silly stuff like that. That system is dead and gone. It's just a matter of it further collapsing, and we have the answers monetarily. We have the answers on free market economics and property rights, civil liberties, and a sensible foreign policy. So in order to make a big point, what you need to do is get behind the next president of the United States, Rand Paul.
I think you have just heard from the father of the modern liberty movement. I'd like to introduce my wife, Kelly. We've only been married for 25 years. And I was here, my brothers and my sisters, and a whole group from Texas, if they would stand. The Lord's Prayer is 66 words long. The Gettysburg Address is 286 words long. The Declaration of Independence, 1,322 words long. But the government regulations for the sale of cabbage are 26,911 words long. President Obama has added 25 million words of regulations. We have a government that is literally run amok. Obamacare was 2,000 pages long. You remember what Nancy Pelosi said, right? You can read about it after we pass it, she said. I've got a better idea. Why don't we read the bills before we pass them? Unelected bureaucrats have added 20,000 pages of regulations just for Obamacare. I've got a novel idea. Why don't we repeal 2 regulations for everyone we consider? I think liberty is under assault like never before. Without liberty, our senses are dulled and dumbed down by rules and regulations. The question we face is not, though, of just the moment, but it is of such magnitude that we must choose today whether liberty can survive in a democracy unrestrained by Constitution. Can a civilization that chooses to transfer the fruits of labor from one group to another, can such a civilization long endure? Won't we inevitably run out of other people's money? The American experiment with liberty is not totally won. Today, tomorrow, and the day after that, we must fight to restrain Big Brother. Will you stand with me? Will you stand together against the rising tide of government excess that threatens to trap us in the clutches of Big Brother? Will you stand with me? Thank you. I think we have confirmed you will stand with me. I hope you will also caucus with me tomorrow. In Washington and on the campaign trail, Republicans and Democrats alike call out for bigger government. Only a president who understands the corrupting influence of big government can stop it. On the right, the call is for enlarging the military state. On the left, they call for enlarging the welfare state. And the dirty little secret in Washington is the right and the left always get what they want, more spending, and you get stuck with the bill. Good, you guys are getting it. You cheer for the good stuff, you're booing for the bad stuff. The loudest voices in Washington for more spending are actually right now Republican voices. Recently, Cruz and Rubio put forth an amendment They put forth an amendment to increase military spending by $200 billion. So I decided I would counter this amendment. They wanted to increase military spending $200 billion. I put forward an amendment that said, if you want to increase military spending, you got to cut it somewhere else. Guess what happened, though? Cruz and Rubio said, oh, we'll only vote to raise spending, but not if we have to cut something. This is the story of Washington. Everybody wants to spend, but nobody has the guts to cut things. When I'm president, we will balance the budget because I will look at all spending across the board. The inconvenient truth is that you can't be a conservative if you are liberal with military spending. We do not become a stronger or a safer nation if we borrow from China to inflate our military budget. We spend more on our military than Russia and China and the next 8 nations combined. More than 10 countries combined is what we are currently spending. And there's waste everywhere. From $43 million to build a natural gas station in Afghanistan, to a nearly $1 million we spent developing a televised cricket league for the Afghanis to watch. It's crazy what we're doing. The unholy compromise is that Republicans get more military spending only if they trade Democrats a whopping dose of increased domestic spending. To balance the budget, we have to restrain across the board all spending. That's how I've been able to propose a budget that actually balances. The National Taxpayers Union named me the most frugal lawmaker in Washington because I'm willing to look everywhere for wasteful spending. Both parties carelessly infringe on our civil liberties and contribute to an assault on the Bill of Rights. The left attacks your Second Amendment right to bear arms. The right attacks your Fourth Amendment right to privacy. I'm the only candidate on the stage who will defend the entire Bill of Rights. Since the terrorist attack in San Bernardino, the left is calling out for more gun control, but the right's calling out for more people control. The left calls for bans on gun sales, and the right clamors for the government to gather up all of our records. I don't know about you, but I say that our phone records are none of their damn business. They claim we won't be safe without letting the government collect all of our records. But there's no evidence that their actions have made us safer. 2 bipartisan commissions investigated the government's bulk collection of all your phone data and found absolutely 0 terrorist plots were disrupted. The Circuit Court, the court just below the Supreme Court, ruled that the bulk collection of phone records is illegal. Cruz, though, claimed he was with us on reforming the NSA. But he talks out of both sides of his mouth. You saw him on the debate stage. When Rubio questioned him on this, he says, oh no, he voted for the bill because he favors allowing the NSA to collect 100% of your cell phone records. If his goal is to collect 100% of your cell phone records, he greatly misunderstands the liberty movement. I've got a better idea. Why don't we collect 0% of your phone records? Keeping the government out of our records is essential to creativity. Pink Floyd understood. All right, just Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd understood that genius needs to be left alone. Whether your ideas are politically correct or not, whether you're a painter or a self-proclaimed prophet, the exhortation is to shine. Shine on, you crazy diamond. For the crazy diamonds to shine, government must get out of the way. The leave me alone generation is a generation that believes they can conquer the world and solve any problem if left free to follow their dreams. You are the leave me alone generation, and I want you to shine, shine on. It isn't about how government will lead us to prosperity. The debate is about getting government out of the way of human ingenuity. To defend ourselves without bankrupting America, we must re-examine our foreign policy. Ted Cruz, Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, let's just say, etc., etc. They will tell you that they want to carpet bomb the Middle East. Cruz wants to make the sand glow. Trump has informed us that our problem is that we have been unwilling enough to use nuclear weapons. I'm the only candidate who asks, will indiscriminate bombing of civilians create more terrorists than we kill? I'm the only one willing to point out that every time we've used our military might to topple secular dictators, from Saddam Hussein to Gaddafi, the result has been chaos. And the void has not been filled with Jeffersonian democracy. The void has been filled with radical Islam. The Iraq War alone cost us $1 trillion. We lost 5,000 of our young, brave men and women. Thousands more live on with catastrophic injuries. As Commander-in-Chief, I would never ignore the human cost of war. The other candidates offer you more of the same: macho rhetoric, fear-mongering, and perpetual war. Rubio says we should shun Putin. Kasich says we should punch him in the nose. Christie says that we need to be ready to shoot down Russian planes currently flying over Syria and Iraq, and yet no one asks, what happens next? Alone on the stage, I call for a reasonable, realist foreign policy where we stand strong enough to deter any attack, but not eager to start World War III. war should be the last resort, not the first. When we must fight, it should be to defend America, not for regime change and not for nation building. When I am president, we will only fight wars that are constitutionally declared by Congress. One candidate in particular wants you to give him power. He tells you he's rich, so he must be smart. If you give him power, he says he'll fix America. But you know what? There's another tradition in America, a tradition that believes that power corrupts, and that our goal should not be to gain power, but to contain power, to limit presidential power. Our founding fathers feared centralization of power. As Madison wrote, where an excess of power prevails, no man is safe in his opinions, his person, or his possessions. Our founding fathers wrote the Constitution to restrain the accumulation of power by government. Trump is ignorant of this tradition. And in many cases, he is overtly opposed to the limited government philosophy. He believes that government has the right to seize your property and give it to a rich crony through eminent domain. This is abhorrent to anyone who champions the rights of the individual. He supported the government bailing out of the banks. He has used government to get rich and bully his competition, and now he asks you to give him power. This race should be about which candidate will protect you from an overbearing government, not which candidate will grab the ring of power. Electing Gollum should not be our objective. I am the only one in this race who doesn't want power or dominion over you. I want to set you free, I want to leave you alone, and I want a government so small you can barely see it. For several years now, I've been fighting against indefinite detention, the law that allows American citizens to be imprisoned without a jury trial, a law that was sadly signed by President Obama a few years ago. My fear is that one day a president might use indefinite detention the same way FDR used executive power to send Japanese Americans to internment camps or to detain African Americans like they once did in the South. Power corrupts, as we have seen with an out-of-control IRS using its power to harass and intimidate conservatives. The IRS presumes you are guilty until proven innocent. Imagine being detained without a trial because your own government deems you suspect but doesn't have to prove it. When I think of the terrible possibilities of indefinite detention, I'm reminded of a scene from To Kill a Mockingbird, when Atticus stares down the vigilante mob that has come to lynch Tom Robinson. Luckily, Scout comes to the rescue. She recognizes the leader of the mob as the father of a boy from her class. "I go to school with your son Walter," she says. "He's in my grade and he does right well. I beat him up one time, but he was real nice about it." Tell him hey for me, won't you? The little girl broke the angry mood of the mob by personalizing it. Scout found the inner humanity that exists even in a mob hell-bent on violence. When there is a mob intent on indiscriminate government searches, when there is a mob intent on detention without trial, then someone must stand up. Someone must stand up and shout down the mob. As president, I will not only shout down the mob, I will end indefinite detention once and for all. When everyone says we must give up our liberty for a false sense of security, I can't help but think of Atticus again. When Atticus took the case of defending Tom Robinson, most of the townsfolk thought him wrong. In Washington, that sentiment is often true. After my filibuster for the right to be left alone, some said I was the most unpopular person in Washington. But I thought of what Atticus Finch said. Before I can live with other folks, I've got to live with myself. The one thing that doesn't abide with majority rule is conscience. The majority is not always right. In fact, the majority is quite often wrong. For a Republican to win again, we will need to be brave enough to believe that ideas are powerful, maybe even stronger than armies. To win, we will need to become a bigger, better, bolder party. We need to welcome people of all walks of life, black, white, brown, with tattoos and without tattoos, with earrings and without earrings. We need to be a bigger, better, more diverse party, and as my dad always says, liberty brings people together. It's the common desire to be left alone that binds us all together as unique individuals. After all, big government hurts people from all walks of life, rich and poor. The woman in Detroit who wanted to run a hair braiding business out of our apartment and got shut down by big government. The developer moving dirt on his own land who was jailed by armed EPA agents. The small business that can't compete with corporations and their armies of compliance officers, accountants, and lawyers. The elderly woman losing her home to eminent domain. The teenager from a poor family facing jail time for marijuana. What do all of these individuals have in common? They are all losing their liberty to big government. Today, your government has 48 federal agencies, from the IRS to the Department of Education. They have heavily armed SWAT teams. Is this freedom? No. When I am president, these attacks on our liberty will stop once and for all. The GOP has been the party of emancipation. We are the party of civil rights. We need to be the party of justice. Justice begins when the war on drugs ends. A generation of young black men have been incarcerated and permanently lost their privilege of voting and the opportunity to work. The war on drugs has disproportionately incarcerated those who live in poverty in our cities. Though blacks and whites use drugs at about the same rates, 3 out of 4 people in prison are black or brown. We must begin to treat addiction as a health care problem and not an incarceration problem. For 5 years, I fought. I fought for a vote on a bill that my dad worked 2 decades on, audit the Fed. I fought for 5 years just to get a vote on the bill. But when I finally got a vote on the bill, Ted Cruz was nowhere to be found. In fact, Ted was the only Republican to miss the vote. Even worse, Ted maintains that the correct response to the Great Recession was to have the Fed more aggressively lower interest rates. When we all know that artificially low interest rates are the problem, not the solution. When I am president, the Federal Reserve will learn that their days of unlimited power are over. America has much greatness left in her. We are still exceptional, and we are still a beacon for the world. We will thrive when we believe in ourselves again. I see an America strong enough to deter foreign aggression, yet wise enough to avoid unnecessary intervention. I see an America where criminal justice is applied equally, and any law that disproportionately incarcerates people of color is repealed. I see an America with a restrained IRS that cannot target and harass American citizens for their political or religious beliefs. I see a simplified flat tax that unburdens our citizens from the fear and intimidation of the tax code. I would unleash the engine of capitalism to create jobs and opportunity like never before. Our corporate tax is the highest in the world. Is it any wonder that our companies are leaving our shores? Money goes where it's welcome. I would bring corporate investment back by cutting our corporate tax and immediately bringing home $2 trillion in American profit to stimulate our economy. I see our big cities once again shining and beckoning with creativity and ingenuity, with American companies offering American jobs. I have a vision for an America beyond partisan squabbling, beyond petty divisions. With your help, this message will ring from coast to coast. A message of liberty, justice, and personal responsibility. A message that will gain support from across the political spectrum. A message that will prevail, and a message that will ultimately carry your message of liberty to the White House. Introduce now Cliff Maloney, who's head of our Students for Rand Paul for the whole country. He's going to make a couple of announcements, but I also wanted to make one myself. The camera's set up back here. I'm going to be doing an interview with Megyn Kelly. And And if anybody wants to stick around and show her what an enthusiastic crowd we've had tonight, we'd love to have you.
Listen up, guys. So we now have 10,000 college students pledged to caucus for Senator Rand Paul. If you'd like to speak on behalf of Senator Paul at the caucus tomorrow, whether you're in-state, whether you're from Florida, anywhere in the world, and you want to speak for his message of liberty, we have folks at the back table who can get you signed up. We need every caucus to represent the ideas of Senator Paul. So we're inviting all of you guys to sign up today to speak on his behalf. If you're a student, we've got a meetup location right here at University of Iowa. Right back at Hubbard Commons. All right? Big round of applause for the next President of the United States, Senator Rand Paul.